At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, give him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. You are entering the Stone Zone. Here we talk politics. That's because I'm a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns. Although we're an equal opportunity critic here, we criticize Republicans and Democrats. We call them as we see them. You can call it the stone cold truth, if you will. I must say that I am surprised at this public attack on Tesla dealerships and Tesla charging stations. A left-wing arsonist who tried to burn down a Tesla charging station in protest of President Trump and Elon Musk ended up setting himself on fire. This happened in South Carolina when he attacked a Tesla charging station with a Molotov cocktail. Now, this comes only after Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett publicly called for an attack on Tesla facilities. I remember in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, when if you said the word fight in a speech, as in fight for America, you would be accused of supporting violence, which I never did. But we find the left is not held to the same standard. In this case, Daniel Clark Pounder, 24 years old, burned down 3 electric vehicle chargers in South Carolina in a parking lot a week ago, where he scrawled F Trump and long live the Ukraine, according to federal prosecutors. He was seen throwing 5 Molotov cocktails, one of which was set himself on fire, according to witnesses who saw him fleeing the North Charleston lot in flames. He was arraigned in federal court that same afternoon and now faces a maximum of 20 years in prison. This is just the latest in a series of left-wing domestic terror attacks on Tesla dealerships, charging stations, and vehicles. Last week, a Colorado Tesla dealership was attacked with Molotov cocktails while the words Nazi cars were spray-painted on the front of the building. With Democrats like Tim Walz and the aforementioned Jasmine Crockett are actually applauding this carnage. Yesterday, in a live stream organized by a nascent terrorist movement called the Tesla Takedown, Congresswoman Crockett actually said, "All I want on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down." On Tuesday, Minnesota governor and epically failed and embarrassing vice presidential candidate Tim Walz said amidst the news of the attacks on Tesla that he enjoyed watching Tesla's stock drop on his iPhone. Then Democrat ally, this guy who's with the Lincoln Project, calls himself a Republican, but I call him a mutant, Rick Wilson. He previously said that someone needed to put a bullet in Donald Trump's head, for which he was not suspended on Twitter. He now has been suspended on Twitter for posting an article entitled "Kill Tesla, Save the Country," while including the subhead, "Elon has a weak spot, attack." And that featured an image of a Tesla Cybertruck completely engulfed in flames. This was a clear incitement to violence against Tesla and its founder, Elon Musk. Wilson is best known, as I say, as one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project, whose other co-founder, John Weaver, was sexually harassing over 20 young men, including some as young as 14. Elon Musk, meanwhile, has returned to X, formerly known as Twitter, to the $44 billion valuation he bought it for. So he has actually made back his money, which, of course, many predicted he could never possibly do. According to reports obtained by the Financial Times, investors now value the platform at $44 billion. This is an incredible turnaround, considering that as recently as last September, Fidelity Investments documents suggested the company's value had dropped to below $10 billion. And people were criticizing Musk for his bad business decisions. The left's attempt to hurt Musk's businesses have already backfired in the case of Twitter and SpaceX, which, by the way, rescued our astronauts from international space only this past week, something the Biden administration not only couldn't do, but made no effort to do. The left's efforts to hurt Tesla are likely to fail as well, because they're just going to end up landing several domestic terrorists in prison. Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced that serious charges will be in store for the wave of domestic terrorism against Elon Musk and the Tesla properties. President Donald Trump, keeping a promise originally made by President Ronald Reagan, but now finally executed by President Donald Trump, signed an order dismantling the Education Department only yesterday. He delivered on one of his most important signature campaign promises. Trump directed his Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, who I know quite well, very nice lady, very fine woman, to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education. See, that's because we believe that education is an issue that is best handled at the local level. Decisions regarding the education of our children, in my case, my grandchildren, those should be made by local school boards, not by some bureaucrat in Washington. And those who are expressing shock at the president's actions must not have been following the campaign, because Donald Trump is the first political figure. By the way, don't call him a politician. He is not, has never been a politician. He'll never be a politician. He is the leader of a political movement, and there's a huge difference. He signed the order at a White House ceremony attended by a number of Republican governors and state education commissioners. He said, and I agree, we've got to get the federal government out of education. The Department of Education has become a bloated bureaucracy that's more interested in pushing its own agenda than in helping our kids learn. It's time to put the power back in the hands of parents, teachers, and local communities. I could not agree more. This order by the president takes aims at regulation and paperwork previously required by the Department of Education, arguing that the federal guidance in the form of Dear Colleague letters from the department redirects resources towards complying with ideological initiatives which divert staff time and attention away from the school's primary role of teaching. It's amazing to me when I speak on campuses and I talk about either Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or Barry Goldwater, for that matter, and I see the eyes of students glazing over. We don't teach history in our schools anymore. It's no wonder that students have no understanding of how this country was founded and the principles it was founded on. Federal funding for students with disabilities under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the so-called Title I funding for low-income schools, and federal student loan payments will remain unchanged under the order, while Secretary McMahon works on a plan to bring these funds closer to states, localities, and more importantly, students. However, education programs or activities that receive any remaining federal Department of Education funds will not be allowed to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion or gender ideology. More than 1,300 Education Department employees, bureaucrats, received their termination notices last week as part of a large-scale reduction in force across the federal government, being pushed, of course, by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. I can't imagine any citizen, never mind any federal judge, opposing an effort to identify waste, fraud, and corruption in our government. But that is precisely what we see. And to be absolutely clear, Elon Musk is not uncovering millions of dollars worth of waste, fraud, and abuse. He's not identifying billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. He is actually literally identifying trillions of dollars of waste, fraud, and corruption in federal spending. I can tell you this, Donald Trump is very serious about the possibility of doing away with the federal income tax entirely, going to a completely tariff-driven revenue system, and shutting down the IRS completely. Between renewal of the Trump tax cuts, which will boost federal revenues, as the tax cuts by Ronald Reagan did, as the tax cuts by John F. Kennedy did, combined with deeply cutting spending, once you ferret out the waste, abuse, and fraud, well, Donald Trump's goal of doing away with the income tax entirely and closing down the IRS is a complete and total real possibility. Donald Trump is the leader to do it. We'll be talking about it more when we return. You're tuned in to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Network. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial, because we'll be back with more.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
I'm not your stepping stone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. You're in the Stone Zone. We're just talking about DOGE, the effort by Elon Musk to ferret out waste, fraud, and abuse, including corruption in federal spending. A Maryland federal judge has just issued an order to block DOGE from accessing Social Security records. Judge Ellen Hollander, of course an Obama appointee, claims that Elon Musk's group is simply on a fishing expedition and issued a restraining order to prevent Musk and DOGE from accessing any systems that may contain personally identified information such as Social Security numbers, medical records, banking information, income history, and tax records. President Trump has already announced that Musk's team has found millions of names fraudulently listed in the Social Security database. That's right, we have found people who allegedly are 150 years old still receiving Social Security benefits. Now, Bernie Sanders, this guy's interesting. He used to criticize billionaires and millionaires. Now he just criticizes billionaires. That's because in his two campaigns for president, Bernie and his wife skimmed millions of dollars in quote-unquote media commissions, making him one of the wealthiest members of Congress. By the way, that's not illegal, but I question whether it is ethical. Did Senator Sanders' donors to his two presidential campaigns know that he and his wife were making millions off of his losing campaign? The senator is driving a top-of-the-line Mercedes now. He has 3 vacation homes. You see, it's socialism for thee, but not for Comrade Bernie. But Comrade Bernie said that it was ridiculous that nobody who was 160 years old was receiving Social Security benefits. Well, of course they weren't. That's the whole point. Somebody is cashing those checks. Somebody who is not 160 years old. As Donald Trump himself said, we have millions and millions of people over 100 years old in the system. He said it to Congress just last week. Everyone knows that's not so. We have a very corrupt country, very corrupt system. It's a very sad thing to say, but we're figuring it out, he said. The good thing about Social Security, and what I read is if you take all the numbers off because they're fraudulent or incompetent, if you take those people off Social Security, well, we have a solvent Social Security system. It's interesting because within the same week, AOC and Chuck Schumer both falsely claimed that Donald Trump intends to cut Social Security benefits. If you're an older listener and you hear this, folks, do not be stampeded into believing it's the truth because it's the same basic lie that they trot out every 2 years. Right now, we're in a period that I call judges gone wild. You have several activist far-left judges attempting to interfere with President Trump's administration performing his basic functions, including this cutting of wasteful and fraudulent federal spending, his firing of useless bureaucrats. They're even trying to stop him from deporting criminal, illegal aliens and terrorists. Judge Boasberg in D.C. has actually ruled that President Trump doesn't have the authority to deport illegal terrorists who are in the country illegally. On Truth Social just last night, President Trump said there's an unlawful nationwide injunction by a radical left judge that could very well lead to the destruction of our country. These people are lunatics who do not care, even a little bit, about the repercussions of their dangerous and incorrect decisions and rulings. Lawyers endlessly search the United States for these judges and file lawsuits as quickly as they can find a jurisdiction where they think they can win. It is then the obligation of law-abiding agencies of government to have these orders overturned. The danger, as the president points out, is unparalleled. These judges want to assume the powers of the presidency without having to obtain 80 million votes, as Donald Trump did. They say impeach these judges, but an impeachment requires a 2/3 vote of the U.S. Senate. That's a pretty tough standard. Don't go away because Benny Johnson of The Benny Show is about to join us. We're going to talk about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, and how it compares to what happened in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. The parallels are eerie. So wherever you do, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back in the Stone Zone with our special guest, Benny Johnson of The Benny Show.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
I'm not your stepping stone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Joining me now, the host of the extremely popular Benny Show, Benny Johnson. He calls his show a front row seat to the golden era, and he joins us now. Benny, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Roger, what's going on, man? And what a incredible day for you. The vindication that the White House break-in is in the JFK document. The Watergate break-in is in the JFK document. Like the world is coming to you, Roger. Well done.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It is an absolute fact that 4 of the Watergate burglars just happened to be on the ground in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. How could that possibly be unless, of course, the Watergate break-in was a CIA operation? Actually, documents were declassified less than a year ago that proved that the CIA was aware of the plan for the Watergate break-in, and they infiltrated the Watergate break-in team with 4 active agents of the CIA still reporting to their case handlers, and that the Watergate special prosecutors and the Senate Watergate Committee knew both of these things and covered it up. They were never even allowed to publish a minority report from the Senate Watergate Committee. Howard Baker, senator who was leader of the minority, was not allowed to publish and print a minority report. So you're right. The history has gone full cycle. Benny, you are an individual of enormous energy and wit. I recall on the day that I was arraigned in the phony Russian collusion hoax, we actually made a video on how to make the perfect martini. Do you remember that?
Of course. How could I ever forget, Roger?
It was terrific.
A gentleman to the last. Talk about a front seat to history. You know, you're the guy. You're the guy who's had it. It must be really spectacular. I have to know, Roger. What's it like having the country finally realize what you've been trying to tell people for the last 50 years about Nixon, about JFK, about Reagan, about lawfare, about the CIA? Like, at this point, Roger, and I just looked at recent polling on CNN saying that the vast majority of the country believes that there is a massive conspiracy and that the government had a hand in the killing of JFK. Like, at this point, the country now agrees with you, and you've been a crusader of this your entire career. It's like really special. It's really neat to see it come full circle, dude.
I appreciate that. I think there is a direct line that goes from the warning by Dwight Eisenhower about the military-industrial complex. If you go back and listen to it, it's extremely compelling. Today we call it the deep state. It's the same thing. It is the unelected bureaucrats who are deeply embedded in our national security apparatus, deeply embedded in the Pentagon and our military, deeply embedded in the think tanks and the defense contractors. It's an unelected government. I chart November 22nd, 1963 as the beginning of their taking power. They ultimately drive Nixon from office in a bloodless coup. We now have the declassified CIA documents that prove that. They later attempt to kill President Ronald Reagan. There's a lot of news there. John Hinckley Jr., the man convicted of trying to kill Reagan, he is crouching in front of Reagan, shooting from an upward trajectory. He gets off 4 bullets. None of those 4 bullets hit Reagan. All 4 bullets are accounted for. Reagan is, in fact, hit from above and behind. The government has never issued a report. This, by the way, is my next book. I believe these are the same dark forces, Betty, that tried to kill President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, tried yet again to kill him in West Palm Beach. And it is one kind of line of history. And thanks to Elon Musk, and the great folks at X, where we have now a more, I would say, level playing field when it comes to the internet, more and more people are getting educated. And that makes for a great day in America.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, Roger, I can't go back in time and change my birth date. I was born in 1986. So I can't go relive these things. But the Kennedy assassination of my era is us all watching live President Trump miss a bullet. The hand of God prevented that bullet from going, what was it, 3 millimeters? Going straight through the president's skull. Well, anyway, the point is that, Roger, where the hell is that information? Why can't I see the autopsy for Matthew Thomas Crooks? It's not my fault for asking questions. And why was he training at the same gun range as Department of Homeland Security? Who was on the apps that he was communicating with? He was on a phone call right before he took the shots. Who was on that phone call? Why can't we get any of this information, Roger? So all I'm trying to say is you lived through the Kennedy assassination. You lived through and were integral to the Nixon White House. You lived it. This is something that we're living, right? And so for my generation, damn it, we're going to get answers, right? And it's not going to take us 60 years to get these answers to what happened with the assassinations against Trump.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears, don't you find it strange that just as they immediately hosed out the interior of the limousine in which John F. Kennedy was killed, they immediately hose off the roof of the building from which they tell us Thomas Matthew Crooks shot? Could that possibly be because we want no trace of his DNA? And why do they cremate his body? His family did not ask for the cremation of his body. Why did they immediately cremate his body? Unless, of course, they're hiding something. To this day, it shocks me that the Secret Service and the state police and the local police, first of all, they're on different radio frequencies, so they can't even speak to each other. That's odd. And then they know for 92 minutes that there's a man inside the perimeter of the event where Trump is holding a campaign rally. He's been seen with a rangefinder. He's been seen with a weapon, yet nobody informs the immediate security detail for Donald Trump. And therefore, he's not evacuated, which is what the Secret Service manual requires. It boggles the mind, and we get no answers from the Secret Service. We get no answers from the FBI. We get no answers from the previous administration. Betty, do you think we will get answers from this new administration?
Yeah, because for the first time in our lifetimes, I think we have an administration that is walking in very clear-eyed in understanding the darkness that they're fighting. And we've seen enough. And I think the American public has seen enough, Roger. And we've seen the dirty tricks. We've seen it all play out. The president's been a victim of them. And there's not going to be one giant takedown moment. They've already missed their shot, right? at this point, metaphorically and literally. And does J.D. Vance want this to happen to him? Junior want this to happen to him? People are going to say no, and we're going to have to rip the heart out of the darkness. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom style. And the way to do that is to ask the right questions. I still find it remarkable. So these new JFK documents dump, and lo and behold, here's the Watergate break-in right at the very top. And the vast majority of the American public, even though the evidence is demonstrable, showing that it was a CIA plot and people that were directly involved have admitted to it, they still think that it was Nixon the whole time. I just think we live in a different information era, Roger. And, it's sort of generational, right? It's the difference between a boomer generation or a greatest generation, or the silent generation versus a slightly edgier, more, what's the right way to say this? More access to information. So it's far more skeptical generations. That is like the Gen Z and millennials.
Literally 2 days after he was inaugurated as president in 1969, Nixon sent his then legal counsel, John Ehrlichman, over to the CIA to ask for all the documents pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. And they were flatly refused. Think about that for a moment. See, the commander-in-chief instructs the head of the CIA to turn over the documents, and he refuses to do so. What was it Nixon was looking for? Well, I found that out when in two places. Once, when I asked him directly over a cocktail who really killed Kennedy, and he told me after brooding and looking at his martini for a few minutes, he said, "Let me say this. The Warren Commission was the biggest GD hoax in American history." I said, I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand. What are you saying? He said, well, let me put it to you this way. Lyndon and I both wanted to be president, but I wasn't willing to kill for it. Now, I've never said, and I don't say in my New York Times bestselling book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, I don't say it was Johnson acting alone or unilaterally, but I do believe there was a plot that involved the CIA, organized crime, Big Texas Oil at a minimum, but it's Lyndon Johnson who has a common thread, a common connection to each one of those entities. I've had a chance to talk about it a lot in the last 48 hours. Looking at what happened in West Palm Beach, to me, this is in some ways even more disturbing than what happened in Butler. In that they tell us that Ryan Routh, the man who is accused of planning to shoot the president, they tell us he's indigent. They tell us he's behind in his rent payments. He's behind in his alimony payments. How did he get to the United States? Who paid for his ticket? How did he get here? Unlike Tulsi Gabbard, who they put on a secret domestic terrorist watch list at the TSA, a former 4-term congresswoman, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, a combat veteran of both Iraq and Kuwait. She we spy on, but evidently Routh was, what we expected to believe, not on their radar screen?
Well, he was on their radar screen. That's what I think is wild, is that he was referred to the Department of Homeland Security Police, the same Department of Homeland Security Police that was guarding Trump. They refused to investigate. The FBI admitted in Miami that they knew who he was because they had already had a terrorism charge against him. He wasn't allowed to own a firearm, and they had reports that he had purchased a firearm. Turns out he purchased a firearm to kill the president. Like, they knew him. Like, say the line. It's like the humiliation ritual, Roger. Let's say, we knew the gunman. It's like the FBI line. At some point, you have to step back and admit, like, either everything's a coincidence or there are no coincidences. Because there's just too much adding up. And it's the Ukraine stuff that makes me the most nervous about this guy. How the hell this loser, loner, guy who couldn't even pay his rent, get to Ukraine so many times? How do you even get to Ukraine, Roger? It's really expensive. And wait a second, impossible, because they're at war. You can't even fly. Try booking a ticket into Ukraine. You can't do it. He was invited there by the Ukrainian military. He went to the front lines. He recruited for them from terrorist hotbeds. And then Ryan Routh got no-look stamped visas from the American State Department to get fighters into Ukraine. You can only get a no-look visa if you're working with the State Department. Ryan Routh is a Fed. He was a Fed, and he was working with probably some type of splinter operation to try and take out Trump. And that's why they weren't using the type, the Secret Service wasn't using the type of technology that could spot somebody from the bushes. You know, we have UV goggles. You can, there's no hiding from those. Why aren't we using that? Drones, like all the technology that we have, they didn't use it, even after the first assassination. Sorry, what I'm saying here, Roger, is, damn it, man, we're not going to let them Kennedy these assassination attempts. We're not going to let them Warren Commission us into thinking that, like, these are just lone gunmen acting alone. And same thing with Butler. There's no way that guy was just acting alone. No freaking way, Roger. So we're going to, on my show and what we do, we're going to stay on it like a dog with a bone.
All right, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Benny Johnson of The Benny Show, and we'll be right back with more. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
I'm not your stepping stone. Stepping stone.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. We're talking to Benny Johnson of the ever-popular Benny Show. Benny, I recall after January 6th, if you said in a speech the word fight, as in, say, fight for America, the left would immediately accuse you of advocating violence when you were doing no such thing. Now you have Jasmine Crockett, not exactly a genius, actually actively urging people to attack Tesla dealerships. And we saw an arsonist actually set himself on fire after attacking a South Carolina Tesla charging station with a Molotov cocktail. What's going on here?
Well, Roger, you've been in politics. How long have you been in politics, Roger?
50 years. But when I say I've known Donald Trump 50 years, he tells me to stop saying that because it makes both of us sound old.
Okay, so 50 years. Have you ever known a nonviolent left?
No, but they previously now they're not even hiding it. I mean, you got two things going on. You've got this, what I call judges going wild, where you have judges trying to usurp executive power, making rulings in an area where they literally have no authority. And that's lawless. But this is even more dangerous. Yesterday, we interviewed Owen Schroyer because he had his home swatted. Talk about terrifying. I mean, my home was swatted too, but mine was done by professionals. I mean, this is a horrific trend that we're looking at.
Boy, we're asking a lot of questions on this interview, Roger. Did you ever get an answer to how CNN knew to be outside of your house at 4 a.m.?
Yeah, it's absolutely clear. So I was arrested at 6:06. At 6:11, someone you know from CNN sent a text to my lawyer to say, your client has been arrested. And he said, arrested for what? And in response, they sent my lawyer a copy of my sealed indictment, an indictment that would not be unsealed by a federal magistrate until 11:30 that morning in Washington, D.C. So how did CNN get my sealed indictment? Well, when you went to the metadata tags on that document, which had no on it, no timestamp on it, and you saw the initials of the man who leaked it, Andrew Weissman, the number 2 man, the really de facto number 1 man in the Mueller investigation. By the way, that's a felony to leak a search warrant or an arrest warrant and an indictment in advance of it being unsealed is a felony. The judge in my case, of course, could care less. So, and as you know, CNN won an award from the White House Correspondents Association for their intrepid and brilliant investigative reporting that led them to set up a camera tripod 25 feet from my front door 15 minutes before the FBI even showed up. There is your answer. It is a seamless a cabal between the mainstream media and the deep state.
Well, there you go. And if they were honest and if they were reporting on true terrorism in this country, then they would have reported on the Weather Underground, and they would have reported on various factions of BLM and Marxist and liberation groups. Remember the bombs that went off inside of the Capitol? Nobody even, it's like ancient history, right? They'll try and create a September, they'll try and create a January 6th memorial, but they won't ever talk about the left-wingers that exploded multiple bombs inside of the United States Capitol building. It's lost entirely to history. So I guess with this Tesla dealership, these are the actions of very sad, embittered, needle-dick people who are miserable and live with their moms in the basement playing Minecraft all day and getting all their news from Reddit. And they're incels, and they're filled with rage, and they're filled with estrogen and hormones. And they've always been taken advantage of, that kind of feline rage, by their masters in the Democrat Party that amp them up to viciously send them after the targets of their ire. Right now, that happens to just be a electric vehicle company.
Yeah,
that they were just mandating all of us buy a couple weeks ago. They were mandating we all buy Teslas, and now they're mandating we all get burned. So it's amazing to have enemies this dumb, Roger. It's actually quite entertaining.
It's very, very sad. All right, we have to leave it there. Betty, one of the things you do that I really love is you post a picture of your beautiful family, your beautiful wife, and your beautiful children, and I respect that so much. God bless you for coming on today, and be safe out there. Please, my friend, be safe. God bless you.
God bless you, Roger.
Thanks, folks, for tuning in to the Stone Zone, and thanks to our guest, Benny Johnson. Until we meet again, God bless you and Godspeed.